Hey everyone, and welcome to Zen and Tech, our weekly podcast focused on centering your inner geek and using technology to help deal with the stresses of your connected life. I'm Rene, and your host for the show is Georgia. Before we begin, I just want to remind you that while Georgia is a therapist, she's not your therapist. Everything said or implied on this episode is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and shouldn't be taken in any way as a replacement for personal, professional care. Hit the music and go live. Georgia, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I am so tired. I just came back from a week at the Consumer Electronics Show where I got maybe 3 hours of sleep a night. But boy, did I walk what's left of my butt off. So good exercise, really poor sleep hygiene. Sorry about that.
For sure. It's a lot to take in. And how did you deal?
You know, at first we did quite poorly. We had a bunch of us there and we would just go out and try to record stuff and we just couldn't keep up. We became our own bottlenecks because it takes much longer to you shoot video and it takes much longer to get the video onto your machine, edited, uploaded to YouTube and posted than it does just to shoot it. But then like by the second day, we had Ali Kazmuha sitting there with 3 MacBooks at the Net Shelter blogger station. And Leanna and I and Jared and Simon and everyone else from Mobile Nations would go out, get video, bring it back, swap phones, give it to her. And she would just pump out the video. And that was all rock sore.
Sweet. So you made it work.
We did. It was adaptation. It was, what do they call it? Something being the mother of invention? Necessity?
Yeah.
Or is it pain? I don't know. Pain and stress are the mother of invention?
Right.
But enough about me, Georgia. How about you? How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. What show are we at today? This is which number of... is it 28?
Hold on. I am checking.
It's not my right number.
I
know that.
I am checking the official statistics. It is Zen and Tech number 30.
Really?
Whoosh.
So awesome.
Boom.
That's wild. I can't believe we've done 30 Zen and Techs.
Yeah, it's amazing. Congratulations, Georgia, and thank you for doing this.
Well, thank you as well. Today's a pretty interesting one. It was actually a request, and we're dealing with forgiveness.
Forgiveness. Well,
yeah,
I forgive you for picking this topic. How's that?
Thank you. I appreciate that. No, this is a really rough one because... deep-seated emotions have a real difficulty and can mess with your life. So
before we start, when you say forgiveness, what are you talking about? Because it's just a word, and people throw around things like sorry almost as a meaningless adjective you add on to a sentence at this point.
Right. So forgiveness does not mean about forgetting. It doesn't mean that you invalidate your own feelings and that you say that you weren't really hurt, which a lot of people I have come in and talk to me and say, it didn't really matter. You know, yes, my parents beat me, but it doesn't really matter. Well, it does matter. You invalidating yourself is not, going to actually help you go through that.
So it's not that's exactly it. It's not a perfunctory term. It's not something you just say or toss out or are obliged to utter in a sentence.
Exactly. It's also not something that needs to, a lot of people are like, the only way that, I can reach forgiveness is by talking to this person, or even if someone's passed on. And so they feel that they need to have that interaction with that person that's hurt them in order to deal with forgiveness. And you don't. Actually, it's all inside of you. And it's, again, adding a variable that you cannot control.
Right, I'm sorry. I'm going to slow you down because I'm losing. You are far more advanced level at this than I am.
Sorry.
So when we're talking about forgiveness, everyone just says, I'm sorry, or do you forgive me? Almost like in a conversational sense. But is there something inside us? Is there like a need to feel like someone has said sorry to us or someone has accepted an apology from us? What are we dealing with on an actual mental, emotional level when we feel we need apologies or to make apologies?
Okay, I'm just dealing with the forgiveness part. Whether or not someone says sorry or not, the peace has to come within you. Okay. You don't actually need the person that injured you to say sorry or make recompense in order for you to move on. I think that is, often it'll never happen. Often it can't happen. And again, this is the person that hurt you in the first place, so it may not happen. If you can get that, fabulous. but it's not something that is necessary in order for you to be able to be at peace with something that occurred.
So, and it's also kind of disempowering, right? I mean, you're making your state depend on their actions, which is nothing you can control.
Right. Right. It's just you never know it depends on what's within you and how it's hurt you. So you have to go through your own stages of grieving in order to figure out what you can deal with and what you can't, and why you can't move on to from one thing in comparison to another thing.
Well, that was my next dumb question. Why do we feel the need for forgiveness? What about us demands that this thing exist?
Well, we're social creatures. We live in an ecosystem, and in the end, if you were taken away from your pact, if you were hurt or injured in your hierarchy, it could mean that you would allow your pact to injure you again and perhaps leave you, which would be death. So there's actually an environmental need for social constructs and rules and regulations. So us feeling bad because someone does not deal with the proper social decorum comes down to a cultural phenomenon of us we're living in groups.
So we kind of, when we feel wronged or we feel like we've wronged somebody, it makes our I don't know what the right word is, our unit, our social group feel out of balance, and we feel sort of a natural tendency to restore that balance.
Right. We all have preconceived notions of the manner in which we should be treated. If someone breaks those norms, we often feel hurt because of that. And the gravity depending on the way that we were brought up and the rules and regulations to our culture and the way that our parents raised us. So thoughts, any of those that are broken could cause us to be hurt, and we feel anger or resentment or upset or hurt towards the person that did that.
Because there's a certain, I don't know if it's a selfish or there's a certain element that just wishes you didn't feel that emotional attachment. That if someone was mean to you, you could just say, oh, well, they're a jerk, I hope they die, and not feel anything because of it. Or if you were mean to somebody, you could just say, well, I'm a jerk and I hope you die, and don't feel any emotional need for it. But we seem to have this, like you said, nature and nurture compulsion to tackle this issue.
Well, it's a wonderful thing, actually, though it doesn't seem like it, to be able to be hurt. So I remember being teased as a child, and that's the kind of hurt, being hurt or teased or humiliated as a child. It'll stay with you forever. You can say, it doesn't really bother me. And it might not bother you as much as it did when it first happened, but you carry it along. That's what gives us empathy and will hopefully help us to not repeat the process to someone else. I think it might be one of the reasons why I became a therapist, was that I really didn't want anyone else to have to go through the hurt and pain and torment of childhood without having a social structure in place that they could feel better for this.
As an individual, while at some level we might think it would behoove us not to have an emotional attachment to others, to be impervious, as a society, we need that empathic bond on so many levels to achieve so many things.
Right. Right. And I think that in that way, it's a good way. If you didn't feel bad or hurt, now we're talking about someone that's lacking an emotion, and, there's some scary type of personality traits that come out with that.
Mostly in government, yes.
That's true. More so in government than others. But how do you get there? It's a horrible feeling being angry and upset over something, and it can linger for years. I know people that are carrying something for 40 years, and it's like it happened yesterday. They cannot move on. They are emotionally stuck in a very negative emotion, which will eat at you slowly but surely.
Oh, see, I love spite. Spite is a hell of a motivator to me. I will do things out of spite that I would never do out of vested self-interest.
Spite is
you
one
said that?
thing,
okay, I'm doing it.
But hurt and injury is different.
Okay.
Spite is a very mild emotion. It's like, but to be, actually injured and wounded from something is much stronger than spite.
So how do you... Sometimes you might read something into it that's not even there. There's been situations where someone has been offended and I haven't even known, or not intended to cause any offense. How do you filter that through first?
Well, in the end, we're talking about there's two different things. So I'm not saying if you've hurt someone else, what you can do. I'm talking about if someone has hurt you, how do you deal with it?
Well, how do I know if they meant to hurt me, or does it not matter if they meant to hurt me or not? I'm just hurt.
Well, in the end, I think that the first thing that you have to deal with is, yes, the intention is the do-all. If they didn't mean to hurt you and you're hurt anyways, then you have to look into yourself as to why, and why can't you let it go? Because everyone does things without thinking, and callously or too quickly, or they don't understand what your wounds are, because we're often injured. You know, if you were always teased for, say, having, you know, bad teeth, and you were constantly bothered when you were a child as having bad teeth, and someone makes a comment like, you know, nonchalant and says, you know, what happened to your teeth look unusual? What happened to them?
Or maybe a comment about teeth in general, not even specifically. You're so sensitive about that.
Right, that it's going to hurt you, but it wasn't their intent to hurt, and you have to be able to let that go.
Okay. So you're instinctively going to take that offense though, right? Because you are damaged, because it is an issue for you, or because you just think that they are intentionally trying to do something. So is that one of those things where, if we go back a few episodes, that pausing, that taking a breath thing really helps out?
Yes, definitely do not just allow yourself to react. Anytime that you feel your body hit, like your anxiety level or your anger, go really quickly up from like a 0 to a 10 in one word. You know, your teeth look like that, and you go pew, like your just emotions go.
You're getting hurt at the speed of a Lamborghini?
You know not to react. Just leave it. Just leave it. And sit with it for a little bit and say, what's in me? Why does this bother me so much? And what does it say about who I am and what I haven't already dealt with?
So don't worry so much about them or what they're doing or why they're doing it, but first take care of yourself.
Yes, it's all about you. In the end, it's not about the other person. I don't think that in most cases you actually have to go up to the other person and say, listen, you hurt me. You can, but it's not actually necessary. I don't believe that you should allow people to, you know, continually abuse you or to mistreat you or to do horrible things to you. But also, in the end, it's all about you. And whether they say sorry or they say, you know what, you know, bug off. Really, it's still about you. You may not ever get that.
There was this old Zen saying, I forget which Zen person said it, but that you were wounded twice, once by the incident and once by your reaction to it. Right,
right. So we try to make sure that your reaction is, you know, within well and reasons.
So you've taken that breath, you've paused, and then you decide there has to be some kind of reaction. How do you figure out what that reaction should be? I mean, is it like the communications thing where you have to figure out what you want from the interaction before you go into it?
Yeah, I always do the think backwards. It works really well for me because there's different situations. If you're not going to have to interact. Backwards? Yeah, I start with, what do I want the end result to be? So if this happened to a new partner and I want them to buy into my company, well, my end result is I want them to spend money on my company. If they insult my dog, am I going to bring it up with them? And no, I'm not, because then it might offend them and they might feel awkward and there's less chance that that will happen. So the first thing to do is do nothing and then think backwards.
So by think backwards, you mean you start with the goal and then work out the steps it's going to take to get you there?
Yes, goal comes first. So you work that way and then you see which steps you can do in order to deal with it. Now, say that this is your mother-in-law and she says, you know, wow, that dress looks fabulous on you. Are you pregnant? And that hurt because you're not pregnant. By the way, never tell someone that they're pregnant unless you actually see the baby coming out. That's the rule. You don't see the baby, don't say anything. And that hurt you, and you don't want this to occur again, but you also don't want them to feel horribly bad. Well, then you have to decide that way. I don't want this to continue. I want them to know that I felt that. So you might say something like, wow, that was really hurtful. So that they realize, oh, I'm sorry. Did I say something that was hurtful?
So a quick question. In the goal setting episode, you stress that we should make sure our goals are reasonable. I'm guessing it's the same here. Like, you might, in your heart of hearts, be thinking, you will bow down to me and one day so will your heirs. But I mean, that's not a reasonable goal to set for a minor, insult or something.
No, and if you have such a strong reaction to one small comment that someone made, you have to look as well into your own self-esteem and self-worth as to why that is happening. How can someone else do something, say something that breaks you down that far?
Okay. So again, it comes right back to you. Why are you reacting that way? And you can, and luckily you can't always control your reactions, right? Especially if they are influenced by things in your past. But starting to think through the process and going through that, the planning seems to be very helpful.
Right. I think that the hardest type of forgiveness to deal with is when it happened during our childhood. Someone in the chat room was talking about being beat by their parents. And I think a lot of us from certain generations, it's just what parents did.
Yeah.
Totally wrong, but it's what happened. Or cases of which they were humiliated by the people that were supposed to protect them. So teachers, I remember being hit in school by my teachers in front of the other classmates. And that was humiliating. I remember having a dunce cap put on my head and like stuff that's from the Middle Ages. I have no clue how it even got through.
Quebec educational system for the win.
Yeah. Woo. But that type of stuff leaves lasting effects because it's two things. One is you're being hurt and humiliated. And two is that these are the people that are actually supposed to be there to be protecting you.
Yeah. So it feels almost like a betrayal and the hurt at the same time.
It is a betrayal. It is a betrayal. Now, they're trying to do it in some cases to teach you something, but what it's actually teaching you is not to trust.
Yeah.
And I remember never even telling my parents. And when I told them more recently, actually quite recently, that this happened, they were shocked. They said, well, why didn't you ever tell us? And I was like, I figured that I must have done something really horribly wrong. So now I'm also attributing it to myself.
Well, also, we come from a generation, not like today, but when you got in trouble at school and you went home and they found out you were in trouble at school, you got even more trouble.
You see, I don't even think that that would have happened. No, I don't even agree with that. I think that I just did it out of worry and shame, and I was doing something small that was wrong. It did not warrant the reaction that it had, but I can't even say that I gave that as the reason. My parents would have probably fully supported me and dealt with that. So I think that I attribute it to myself. I think that one of the first steps I had to do in going through my forgiveness process was to say, to forgive myself for my part in it and for not standing up for myself in the entire role, not to feel guilty, not to feel shame, and not to feel that I must have deserved to be humiliated and injured and feel horrible. And that's hard to do.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't want to get off on too much of a tangent, but there are a lot of things that can happen to you in your life where you will have to forgive yourself, that you will feel like you betrayed yourself, that you let yourself down, that you had the wrong reaction, that you will blame yourself for things. And that can be just as hard, if not harder, than forgiving someone else.
Right. Right. It is the hardest step in that. And the first step is actually validating your feelings. So if you're saying, you know what, it didn't really matter, that's not validating that what your feelings matter. It does matter. It is a big deal. It is something that is the first thing that you should say. I felt angry. I felt upset. I felt humiliated. I felt betrayed. It made me feel small and less than. And that's not okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I was, I think, twirling my braids in class when it happened. Yeah, I shouldn't have been. But it didn't mean that you had to do that to me.
I mean, even more serious, like, yes, I was walking in that part of town, or yes, the guy took my wallet and I didn't fight back. I mean, like, there's all sorts of situations
or yes, I was wearing something that was skimpy.
So, I mean, like, yeah. And there's also going to be situations, and I think this is the hardest for people, where they have a preset determination in their head for what should happen when they want someone to, when they feel offended or they want someone to apologize. And there will be situations where that'll never happen. Like, you might have a problem with a parent. You might have problems with a friend. I think especially parents can be very challenging, and it's just they will not give you what you need. No matter what it is you need, a sibling, anything, you won't be able to get it. How do you deal with that?
Exactly. That's really hard. And it's hard to some parents will say, you know what, I'm sorry. I wish that I had done this and that. But most of the times it won't. And in the end, it doesn't. You have to kind of go through it first, the process of writing it down. I like to do it through writing. Other people like to do it just through thought. And sometimes the writing is painful, but I think that in order to validate your own feelings, writing it down or even putting it onto your iPad or iPhone or Android phone or whatever, tech you use or laptop is
Siri
good.
Record
But then again, you have to make sure that it's safe and it's not that someone else is going to use it and look at it and feel bad. So first thing is validating your feelings. Like, you have to validate, this made me angry, made me feel upset and small and hurt me. And it's reasonable for me to feel that way, not it's okay.
Yeah, it wasn't okay.
It wasn't okay. And then the second thing is that you have to also, like, everyone makes mistakes, and we do the best that we can. Unfortunately, a lot of people were brought up and doing the best they can, and they have their own issues of abuse or hurt, and that was okay for them. Like, there was a certain generation where when my father went to school, like, everyone got beaten, and it was actually like, it was torture. Like,
they would hit you just in case you'd done something wrong.
It was actually torture. Like, I won't go through it because I don't want to give any secondary trauma to anyone else, but they would torture people. So, you also have to take a look at where this is coming to. Unfortunately, being an adult and how to treat people is not taught to us in school. It's probably much harder than it is to ride a bike or drive a car.
Learned
and these
behavior.
are things taught to learn. So we have to also give a little bit of attribution that this person had problems and this is why they did that.
That actually raises a really good point, because I think that often the media does us a disservice. And I know you've pointed this out in the past, but we watch all these television shows and movies where everything is Disney-fied, where you have the big conversation moment and everyone has these huge epiphanies and there's crying and hugging and beautiful, happy endings all tied up in a neat and tidy little bow at the end. And that almost never happens in real life. And if that's your expectation, it can be devastating when you don't achieve it.
Right. And I actually will tell people that come up to me and tell me really horrific, things of abuse. I will always say, I really don't advocate going up to someone else and talking to them about it for two reasons. One is that you'll probably not get what you want from your parents or from the teacher or from, your friend. You probably will not get that, again, fabulous if you can, wonderful, but it should not even be necessary. In the end, it's all your internal process. But if it doesn't happen, or say that they break down into tears and you've now hurt them, you go through another set of guilt in having to discuss it. Or worse comes to worse, in the worst cases, people say, that never happened. Like, they don't even say that they did, but they say that they never did that. And that makes us really upset because it completely invalidates even the occurrence of the event. And that becomes really, really difficult. So I think that the first process is you have to have that conversation for yourself.
Yes.
That they say, you know what, I did the best that I could, and no, it wasn't perfect, but I didn't actually want to harm you, and I'm sorry for that. So sometimes I'll write it down, what I wish that they would say. I actually have a little tiny forgiveness ceremony that I really like, which is you write the person's name down on a piece of paper with what happened. And you sit with it, you cry, yell, be upset. And this is, of course, for something that's a big deal, not for the little deals that we talked about before. How it made you feel and how you need to heal yourself so you do not continue the abuse. Because often we'll then keep those hateful feelings in ourselves. Like, yeah, you know what? I am stupid. I am a failure. I do this again. Like, we then start running the abuse in our own heads, and we need to stop that critical, negative self-talk. Like, I must have deserved to get hit because I was such a bad kid.
Can I just say that our chat room is absolutely fantastic. They are sharing so many amazing stories and so much wisdom that I'm sorry we can't get to all of it, but it is just fantastic. Yeah, and I just, again, for privacy, there are amazing, beautiful stories, but again, being a therapist, anyways, I don't know if anyone wants to share their stories. Yes. So I would if you had wanted to on the show, but everyone's sharing their own stories of trauma and torment and abuse. And they're not bad stories. A lot of them have had amazing, they've dealt with this and emerged from this, and it's almost heroic. Yeah, it is. It's absolutely beautiful. And the nice thing actually about the sharing is that it validates that other people have gone through it, that it's not okay. I'm getting a little verklempt, but that,
that there's a way out and there's a support system, and that's really important.
And you're not that's the thing I love about the chat room. And if you haven't been here live, please do come to the next show live, because one of the things that everyone says to us with these shows is, I thought I was the only one. I thought this only ever happened to me. And just the simple realization of knowing that other people are going through the same thing, that you're never ever really alone, is so empowering and such an amazing first step that I think it's really valuable for people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really nice, and it makes a big difference. So the last steps in dealing with it. So after that, I like to burn it when I've gone through the process, and I can, you have to validate that you feel these feelings. You cannot forgive someone unless you go through that you're angry, that you're upset, that you're hurt. You can't then forgive them. True forgiveness, it has to be honest.
It's a process.
Not, our body doesn't believe it. So you have to allow to sit with that. It's not a comfortable feeling, but you have to be able to say, yeah, that wasn't okay. Yeah, that caused me some scars. Often our scars are the most beautiful part of it, is that it makes us who we are. It makes us sensitive to other people, and more than what we could have been, because that's where we bring our empathy through. So, though horrible trauma causes a lot of things to us, it's also part of the beautiful things is into who we become as a person.
It's a path to enlightenment.
Right. Right.
Georgia, this was an absolutely fantastic episode. Is there any homework? Is there any work for us to do?
Well, if you ever want to, if you ever have something that's still stuck that you cannot get past, try the little ritual out. I like the fire thing. I get a little tiny urn thing. I put the name, I put the action, I sit with it. And then when I'm ready, I burn it and just let it go. And then you have to just say, yeah, this hurt me. It's not about forgetting. But, everyone did the best that they could, and they were wrong.
And you have to move on.
I'm still here.
Yeah. Where can we find out more about you?
You can find me on the website, ZENandTECH.tv, and on Twitter at GeorgiaTIPB.
Awesome. And you can find me at Rene Ritchie. You can find me at mobilenations.com or the brand newly renamed imore.com. We are here every week talking about centering your inner geek, dealing with the stresses of your connected lives, and generally being superheroes in training. Right, Georgia?
That is exactly it. And I have to say again, the chat room, that was amazing. Like reading the stories as everything was happening was phenomenal. Like really, really touching and beautiful. And you often don't know how much you help someone else by sharing your story. That feeling of, I'm not alone, it's okay, and someone else understands how I feel, that validation from others is so healing. It's so amazing, and often no one tells you how much that has changed their lives.
We appreciate them. Every stone has ripples. We are here every Sunday night, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. You can email us at podcast@ZENandTECH.tv. Please do. If you weren't here for the live chat and want to share your story, you can contact us on Twitter at ZENandTECH, or you can leave a comment when the show goes live. You can find all our shows at mobilenations.com/shows. Things like Zen and Tech, Super Functional, Iterate, iPhone and iPad Live, Android Central, Crackberry, just tons of shows. Everything for the mobile enthusiast. Georgia, thank you so much. This was a phenomenal show. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And thank you everyone that got to share. It meant a lot to us. So thanks.
See you next week, guys.
Bye.
Bye.